point of how the show reflects on today. What can we compare from the past to the present? Because the show is mainly about the past and the present. It's about clandestine music, and it's also about censorship. It's about fusion of art and music, which often happens today. Video artists, visual artists in every field use music at this point. We have some wonderful musicians here. And yeah, it's a very contemporary show that uses AI and various media, X-ray, music, performance, and also censorship to come to sort of like many level explanation of what the artist wants to say. So I will introduce Richard Humann.
Hello.
Mark, this is my artist. He has shown me work since the 90s, more or less, starting with the Leonovich Gallery and Foundation. He has shown me places at White Box, at Venice Biennale. He has been an artist in residency from Taiwan to Finland. He has shown in my space when I had a gallery for many years. And he's an artist who uses a lot of the contemporary influences in our art and life. So he's digging deep into the history, the art history, and what it means for us today. And then Gail Elston, she's Gail is an art lawyer, but she also has an artist residency in Italy. She's involved with intellectual property. She wrote books on that subject matter, and she is very much involved with artists. The way we met was actually through Carol Schneemann. Gail represented Carol Schneemann. And the last very interesting book she wrote, and is coming out now in December, is an art law and artist rights for creators, authors, and artists. And featured in Pioneer Works Press Play in the middle of December, and previously shown at Paris Book Fair at Off-Print Paris. And Richard Humann is a curator, writer, and has been working many years for the publication Art in America as a managing editor. He writes books, from artist books to fiction. He wrote the book in 2008, New Art China, that New China, New Art, actually. And that was at a time when China was very promising. We thought, oh, this is a new place, art fairs and museums were popping up, and everybody, the international crowd was going there. It represented the economic upswing of China, and that unfortunately has disappeared in the meantime. So I hope it comes around again. And fiction was a book called Subtle Sins, and that's also about the article, but it's sort of like dipping into the so-called art scene as well as talking about a story around it. So I would like Richard to say something about his artwork, mainly explaining it because it's multi-layered. So it's interesting to know the different aspects.
Well, first off, thank you for coming, and thanks Elga and Gail and Richard. Not only colleagues with everyone here, but also good friends with everybody. So I really appreciate it. And the show is about, I base it off the concept of bone music, is what it's called, or jazz on bones. And What that is during the late 1950s, early 1960s, behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union, music was burned onto X-rays. People would go to hospitals and get doctor's office and get X-rays, which they would then burn music onto, like the Beatles or the Stones or Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley. And as I mentioned before, it's like people talk about Ronald Reagan saying, you know, Mr. Gorbachev turned down that wall, but I always say that it was Levi Strauss and the Beatles that got that wall. Like the influence of Western music and Western culture. And when I was given the opportunity to show at this beautiful gallery, and Katya, the owner, will be here very soon, and we'll thank her in person when she's here. I had all these ideas of what I wanted to do for such a massive space, and it just popped up again, this idea of the world we're living in right now, censorship is it seems to be in the forefront of lots of things that we deal with. And I'm not a political artist, I have my political beliefs, of course, and it's impossible to live in America or this world without having that enter our lives on a scale, right? But it's in the background. So what you're looking at first up here, you're looking at basically X-rays that I purchased and scanned and then burned onto discs, which I've gotten from Third Man Records, which is Jack White's place out of Detroit. They provide the material. I wrote the lyrics for this music, and then I had AI create the actual music. So these are discs that you can take off the wall and put onto a record player, onto a turntable. So these are actually musical discs, like a vinyl album is what this is. So each one of these can be taken off and played. People buy this, they get that, they don't want to play it, they get like an 8 file or an MP3 that they can play the music with. But so for me, it's a combination of like this historical past, AI, I'm using the concept of revolution as well, because it was revolutionary music that kind of opened up this world at that time period. So I'm drawing on things that happened 60 years ago and also what's happening today. And the AI alone is something I found very interesting because I write lyrics for a band. And they're a good band. In fact, they're performing tonight. Friends of mine are coming over to hear them perform. And I write the lyrics for the band in a certain way. Working with AI was not, and my role with this was not that much different than working with the band, because when I write lyrics for something, people will say, well, what are you thinking? And I'll say, well, kind of like a Skinner, Americana. I'm throwing out these prompts for these guys. And they kind of take my prompts. I'm like, I kind of hear pedal steel or I hear this. And the only difference truly between AI and working with the band is AI listens to me. The band does not listen to me at all. But believe me, as Richard knows that, so they don't listen to me at all. But, you know, so this is another part of my world. In fact, one of the songs that I had written lyrics for in 2016 passed the first round of Grammy nomination. So it's a professional band. These guys have performed in multiple albums. In fact, they're releasing an album yesterday that they recorded with Neil Dorsman in Todd Rundgren's studio in Woodstock, and that's what the performance is tonight about. So music's a big part of my life. Art obviously is my life, and I wanted to combine these things. So it's combined with the past, the future, revolution, music, art, politics, concept. I'm trying to meld it all together. Whether it's successful, we'll find out. But this is an amalgamation of all those things that make up the world and the world that I live in. So that's the piece. So, and then we can pass this forward to you guys if you have anything to say about it. And then we take questions, so I can answer more direct questions later.
Well, Richard, maybe you want to go first since you're the, or I'll talk about it later. I think Richard's work is so fascinating. Should we introduce the gallery?
Yes, Katya, this is Katya Leonovich, she's the owner.
Sorry, I'm not talking, I'm just, this this is my space, so that's why I'm very happy. And Richard is my good friend, Elga as well, new friends.
Thank you, Katya.
Yes, thank you.
We made our best. It is very beautiful, show. It's very elegant, as my taste and his taste. And I'm artist too, but I also was fashion designer, and I think it's very fashionable. It's very elegant, and I'm very proud. I'm very proud that this show is in my gallery, and I'm very proud that all you came to see and talk. You need to talk, yes, not only him. And so, viva la vida!
Now, Richard, or Gail. No, actually, Gail speaks.
So one of the things about this show that's really interesting to me is the way that Richard is working with AI, because this is the big issue confronting artists today, and I think we have a big future in front of us, which is still undecided about the role AI will play in art production. So as we know, a lot of artists are concerned about AI impacting their livelihood or their place in life, as are many other professions. There are unions, you were talking about ASCAP.
I'm an ASCAP member, yeah.
Yeah, actors that are against AI because they're worried it will usurp the position of humans in creative production. But so far, in the US, the Copyright Office has refused to give copyright protection to an AI-produced element in an artwork. And that's because it's presupposed, and this is well settled in the law, that you must have a human author. And so, to my mind, it's really quite complicated because we do permit and have, forever used artists to give directions and have fabricators make the work. Even when you think of the work of a lot of Fluxus artists, and I think Richard's very related to this, and for example, Yoko Ono, some of her artwork is giving instructions. I think one of her poems, one I think it was a piece that I bought at White Box, was take a bag, fill it with sand, hang it from a tree, I think poke holes in the bag. So these works that give instructions, well, how is that really different from a person coding AI to do something? I mean, personally, I don't think there's that much of a difference. But so far, the Copyright Office has refused to give copyright protection. So in Richard's work, he wrote the lyrics, so it was only the actual music, right?
It's the prompting that I did for the music. And I would like to say one thing. So, back when I moved to New York in 1985, it's a long time now, I live in this old firehouse in New York, and there's a downstairs, I work with a bunch of people. So I worked in those days for The Cure, I worked for Peter Gabriel, I worked for a bunch of people. And I remember Jerry Morale, Peter Gabriel's drummer, this is 1985 now, and he worked with McCartney, played with McCartney and Gabriel. And I say this because he's a real top-notch guy. And he came in with a drum machine, this is 1985. And I remember he programmed this drum machine, and his first thought was, shit, it's gonna put me out of business. And of course it never did. So I'm kind of hoping that that drum machine, what happens to AI, maybe just became a tool. And eventually we realized the drum machine was a little too perfect. It never really able to emulate the sound of a drum set, like with Jerry or other people performing. It can never do it. And I'm just hoping maybe it's just another tool that is used, or another, evolution of the art that we eventually learn to work with and not replace it. And one last thing before, I would never work with AI for actual music that I'm releasing. It was for this exhibition, for this conversation, for the moment in time that we are. Like, I would never actually create something in AI to release it as a piece of work or a body of work in that genre. I'm doing it for this exhibition about revolution, about the things that we're looking at tied into this conversation as well. It's about this conversation.
Gail, maybe you can finish your observation, please.
Well, no, I'm just saying, I think the question of copyright protection for AI is a very nuanced and complicated one. And in the UK, they have permitted already protection for certain kinds of AI-produced works. And the case in the United States is Fowler versus Polymeter, in which Dr. Fowler created what he called the creativity machine, which was an AI program that created a work, and he tried to copyright it with the author being the creative machine and an AI machine, and he being the claimant, owning it as a work for hire. And the Copyright Office said, no, you can't do that because a work for hire presupposes that it's a human employee that produced the work and had the creative element. So it's really, I mean,
But AI initially comes from humans. I mean,
right.
the robot I saw that now sold the work at Christie's or Sotheby's for $1 million. She started, it's a she, the robot is supposed to be female. She started at the Venice Biennale approximately 10 years ago. And she was fed the information, but the information comes from humans, I guess.
It's taking everything with this music that if you hear it later, Mark asked before about the voices, and the thing is, those are AI voices, but they're taken from our voices. Like everything here is the notes, the structure, it's taken from us, so it is in fact, in a strange way, has a human skeleton or basis for it in a weird way. It's just put together from a computer system.
So technically, that would be called a derivative work. And the problem is that AI just does it so much better than a human. It can scrape the internet and derive so much creative expression and combine it in such a complex way that we as humans can't decipher which part remained an individual human expression. That's really the point, that it does it so much better.
It can do something. I don't want to embarrass you guys, but we have two very famous musicians here, and I don't think AI could ever do what you do. In other words, I don't think it could ever get the nuance of the way that you perform, what you do with your performance.
I'm not sure.
I don't know either, and we are right now. I don't know.
Somebody paid $1 million for a portrait made by a robot.
Of course, I mean, there's the piece that was at the Beatles or at the MoMA or something like that as well. But, and if it is, then we just become farmers.
And why in this work did you do the music through AI, but the lyrics?
Well, the lyrics, as a person that writes, I personally didn't feel comfortable doing the lyrics with them, right? And then we fooled around. I've done things with lyrics before where it's like, write me a Bob Dylan song, right? It'll literally pop out Bob Dylan-esque lyrics, right? But I did the music because I originally, when I first had the idea of the show, I wasn't sure what I was going to produce. So I thought, well, in music we have something called stems, like one song could have 32 different stems on it that comes together for one song, like notes of the pedal steel, notes of the guitar, notes of this, and you kind of put it all together in this melding, right? So I thought, well, each X-ray would be one stem. And that was one of my original ideas. Then I thought, well, I've got the band, we own a recording studio. Let me kind of ask the band to perform like 1960s type of music, you know? And it felt contrived. It just didn't, I don't know. When I kept putting it in front of it didn't pass the test for me. So then when I turned to AI, I was like, well, this is a great way to create kind of like mimic the revolutionary sound of that in a revolutionary type of way. And that's what, this is more poetic than prosaic.
So Richard is a writer, Richard Humann is a writer. And how do you see AI influence writing, for example?
It was funny, recently did a project, and an artist was soliciting people in the art world to write a letter to the art world. And there was no money involved. So,
It's the art world, it's the art world.
This is my job. I don't ordinarily do this for nothing. And then I thought, wait, I can have AI do it. And so I prompted AI to write a letter to the art world. And then I wrote in response to what the AI produced. So you had phase one, phase two. And what AI produced was perfectly plausible, very sensible, smoothly written. And it took a while to register that it was actually quite banal, that every idea, every expression was something that you had heard before in a way that you had heard it before. And so I made my response, as cantankerous as possible in contradistinction. But we're at the very beginning of all this.
And like we talked about the Dylan song, like, we were just joking one night, and like, let me put it, with the band, and like, I'm gonna write lyrics right now for AI, and you guys write the song. And it sounds like it would be Dylan, but it's not Dylan, right? So we're using like Dylan-esque words and Dylan-esque phraseology, but it's not like the, subterranean homesick blues type of intensity. It just kind of sounds like it's like Bud Light or something, or that's what it, at least right now, that's what it at. I don't know what's gonna happen 6 months from now or 6 years from now.
I mean, you can play all sorts of metaphysical games with this. You can turn around and say, every artistic production is an imitation. You put a character on a stage, they're pretending to be someone they're not. You create a situation that doesn't exist in the real world, and on and on. So, why is one imitation superior to another?
I guess what you're talking about before is the fact that human beings are involved in one and not necessarily involved in the other. I think that's what we think is drawing this line somehow. Emotionally, I'm not sure if it's emotional response, mental response,
Well,
legal
in
response.
fairness, and this is the other thing that I was thinking about, is that it's a political agenda. So, first of all, the copyright laws were written before there was AI, so there's that. And then though, when you look at cases like Citizens United, where certain rights were given to organizations when it was politically convenient to certain parties, there is an arbitrariness to whether or not you really think it's that important to have human authorship of creativity. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, none of us truly do at this point. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to work with it, because it felt like something I hadn't seen quite, at least this thing yet. Yes, people use AI for things, but I wanted to do it in a way that I felt was not done yet, right? And that's one of the reasons why. And as I said, when you asked about, when I work with the band, it felt contrived that I was asking them to create music. Everything seemed to fit all at once.
Well, in any case, art is using, you did it for many years at modern technology, or whatever modern technology offers.
I mean, all
I was
many artists
astounded.
go back to the Renaissance for doing perspective machines,
Right, Power Obscura,
Yeah.
David Hockney, who was painting in the 80s on an iPad, and that's now the
Certain groups are, Dada's against it, other
It's
groups
become,
are for it.
it received recognition to use modern technology in art.
Yeah.
So that's a part of AI too, I suppose.
I think as long as you can transcend that, right? Like Jessica, we have to keep pointing people out, but we showed them the same gallery, and non-true hyper was a part of that, and Jim, you know, his work is technologically based, but he transcended that. So it wasn't about the technology, he was just using that to, you know, TV booted to get to something that is inside all of us. So he's using technology. So I'm all about using technology as long as we can transcend that to the concept of the idea of it, and not make that the most important. This is me personally, not make the work about the technology per se. You know?
The other interesting issue I think is, and Richard, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is the anti-censorship part, because we live in a very politically charged moment where censorship is something everybody should be worried about. They are, particularly with you know, some national institutions being taken over by governing parties, which is unprecedented really in the United States. So, you know, I think about the First Amendment and, you know, freedom of speech and speech acts and the importance of keeping that freedom of expression sacrosanct. So I think that's a really important highlight about this work, is that you're, you know, referring to a political climate of censorship.
It's definitely a political climate on either side of the aisle, on whatever side of the aisle you're on. You can be canceled by your opposition. I mean, it truly is. So you've got this kind of personal cancellation, but you've also got government censorship kind of stuff, which always irked me from as far back as I remember. You know, banning Huckleberry Finn or the Grapes of Wrath, or what, you know, mostly Booker. I remember this quote when I was in my teens or whatever. It's excuse my pronunciation. Heinrich Heine said, "Men that burn books soon burn men," and that always stuck. For me, that was always sorry to keep on the solution, but that always stuck with me, you know. And so for me, it's always been awesome from 40 years ago. Always.
It's artists who circumvent, who have to circumvent censorship.
Or go through it straight through it. If you can't
In
circumvent it,
the
walk
20th
through it.
century, they did it in the surrealists, they did it in the mid-century.
Sure.
And we thought that it was over, no more censorship as it looked like in the 90s, except maybe for Robert Mapplethorpe. But it was basically not an issue anymore. Now, you know, I hear people like this head of artist residency in the north of France, who's telling me that she cannot use the word feminist. That it's forbidden, it was forbidden to her to use the word feminist because she has she introduces her residency as a feminist residency, meaning not only for women, also for men, but she's not allowed to use the word anymore. I mean, it's becoming again sort of, you know, retrograde instead of progressive.
Yeah, there have been a lot of acts of censorship recently that have been very harsh. Well, actually, here in New York, I think many of us can remember when Chris O'Feely was banned by Giuliani for using his chosen medium, which happened to be elephant dung, and I think a portrait of the Madonna, right? And Giuliani went crazy.
But the crazy thing to me, also the crazy thing about Ophelia, though, is quite honestly, it's a very benign painting, except for the fact that he called it like the Virgin Mary and used elephant dung on it. And in another part of it is it elevated his career beyond belief. So it's a strange paradox. Yeah, huge amount. And it's a rather, in my opinion, benign painting. It's kind of just fun with a lot of dung.
Richard, do you want to elaborate on this subject matter of censorship? Sorry, my question.
Sure. I started going to China 25 years ago when things were opening up, and it was a very exhilarating period, aesthetically, financially, and every other way. And now, we seem to turn and begin to close down. Some people earlier, a friend of mine just had an installation in Shenzhen report explaining what it was, and it was censored. And what they objected to were the words pain and chaos. I was just in Vietnam a couple of weeks ago, and there's censorship there. And one of the things the government objects to is depictions of traffic jams, because they think it's demeaning to the dignity of the country to acknowledge that they have traffic jams. You know, so all of this can become very silly. One of the things about Richard's work is that it reminds us of a time when it was very serious and when there were real differences between things like the Soviet Union and the United States in terms of freedom of expression. And there's been a tendency within the American art world to disparage that period and to say that, oh, the difference wasn't really that great, and you know, the CIA did this terrible thing by secretly funding exhibitions of abstract expressionists, et cetera, et cetera. And that's always seemed to me very short-sighted, both psychologically and historically, because it tends to deny the very great and very consequential differences between those two systems of government and two systems of thought. And you know, now, in recent days, we've had a reminder in Ukraine of exactly what the Soviet Empire was about. And one would hope that would introduce a little self-examination in the art world in terms of our cavalier attitude towards freedom of expression.
So in 2017, I was honored to represent the United States in the Karachi Biennale in Pakistan. And I spent time, it was covered by the United Nations, they paid for it. And I spent time up in Islamabad, and I had to lecture for a university for a couple of days. And that is like severe repression in parts of the areas that I was at. And I mean, art flowed and creative ideas flowed, but two quick stories. One of them was one of the kids who was very, very talented, had to let his family and his community, he had to lie to them and say that he was going to mosque every day, but he was going to this university because his family and people, his brother was part of an organization that would have probably killed him, quite honestly, and if they knew that he was there. And I remember just being, and these were fantastic people, like just amazing people I was with, but that existed, and they were living under this kind of pressure of it. And when I flew back down to Karachi for the opening of the Biennale, one of the large pieces was removed from the Biennale because it had nudity in it, and they were getting bomb threats that they would, people, the night of the opening, people would be murdered if that piece was not removed, so they removed it. So there's censorship comes in all different forms, whether it's government or individuals, and that was a situation where, I mean, you really felt like you were under government as well as outside force repression, but crazy enough, creativity and artistic endeavors still thrive in that environment, you know. I personally don't drink, and in that country drinking is illegal, but I was like the only person who didn't drink as well. So, you know, like everybody, you just had to know the right electronics store to go to and go in the back room and buy liquor.
You don't even have to go as far as Karachi. In Germany, a few years ago, there was a big scandal about Documenta. And the director of Documenta lost her job, and Documenta closed, and then reopened. And there was a whole big thing about a swastika symbol of some sort, and it was ridiculous.
Right, and it happens on both sides too. Like I'm trying to say, it's not just one or the other. it can happen to anybody on either side of the fence you are, you know? And for me, it's always been a cross line, this idea that ideas are just ideas, and it's not something that should ever be repressed. We should be able to deal with all ideas at any given time, you know, good or bad, of course.
Maybe should we open the audience to ask questions? You can ask questions to any of the panelists.
I have a question about the AI. I was walking around the show listening to the songs of the earbuds.
Right.
And, you know, the first time that, to my knowledge, I was listening to AI generated music, it was pretty amazing. I mean, I might be listening to it for a while now, and not knowing.
I mean, this past week, I had some people in from the music world that came in. I did a walkthrough, and these are pretty big people up there. And so one of the guys was saying, they run a record company, and they were like, well, let's see how long it would take us to create a person in AI, all the photos, all the imagery, all the songs that they were doing. So they're creating this persona that they could put into the world. It was an experiment. They didn't do this. It took 3 minutes. And that is the person's look, the feel, a whole body of music, and have everything output to be ready to literally launch into the world. So you might or might not. I know there are record stations now. iHeart possibly just signed this thing that said they would never play anything.
But how good was it? It's only as good as those record label guys.
If you hear this, I mean, okay, so here's the thing. You said it to me. Richard said this to me when I sent him the music. You said, how come this sounds more human than half the songs on the radio now? And it's like, it's true, because a lot of the music that's done today is really compressed. There's a lot of compression in it. It's like, it's formulaic, right? So it's formulaic, there's compression in it. They're using all kinds of machinery anyway to create most of this stuff. Music has gone from bands to individuals now. The people that are making money are individuals in the music business. So to me, I bet you there are certain parts that you wouldn't even know the difference.
Or was it a better use of the tool, or was it innovative? Can AI innovate, or is it only as good as the input that you give it?
It's not even as good as the input, because to create the music I had to create here, I would have to create 40 or 50 songs to pick the one that I like. So it's turning out 49 lousy things in one. But I will say something. It's a miracle. The first time I produced this, I felt like Dr. Frankenstein. Like, it's alive. That's how I felt. The first time I heard it, I feel like Frankenstein.
But Gail, who owns it?
Who owns it? Nobody owns it. I own
If
the
he
lyrics.
creates it through an AI, who owns it legally?
Nobody.
Nobody owns it.
I own the lyrics. I copyright the lyrics.
The human owns the human contributed portions of the work, and the AI portion is not.
But he just said he made 50 versions. He threw out 49.
Exactly.
I'm sure they were iterative. In other words, he tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it, and he made it out of an antique. He said, I want it to be 60s this way. He's in the music industry, so he pulled out all these things from the past.
Yes.
When does AI make something in the future?
Well, let me just say that.
And how?
Well, let me just say that if a human tweaked AI enough beyond editing and prompts, because that's considered minimal, but if the creative input by the human is more than that, then it can become part of the work and totally owned by the human. But it has to be more than minor. It has to be more than prompts, and it has to be more than minor editing. Meaning, if you did a lot of editing, if you threw out a lot,
Right.
and you made a lot of what the copyright office looks at as creative decisions.
But the
You
problem,
made a lot of creative decisions.
here's the problem.
But isn't that what a collage artist
But
does?
here's the problem with it.
Pulls
right?
other people's art together, puts it together. Or
When I did 49, 50 versions, every time you create something and throw it out, it starts from scratch. It doesn't allow me to say, give me that sax in C minor, or you literally start from scratch again.
today.
Today.
Probably not tomorrow.
But you're refining the prompts as you go, right? So let's say this axe doesn't sound right, and then you
storm in its time. It may not be, the sax is completely different. I mean, that's where we are today. But again, tonight or tomorrow morning, I don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow morning. So the question you asked also, is it like a litigious question you asked about tomorrow? Or is it a philosophical question, like which point is it where we're moving to the future? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. I don't know. And it's happening in film, and it's happening in writing. Right now, it's kind of easy. You guys heard the terminology uncanny valley. You know, that's like the terminology that's thrown out there now. So uncanny valley is like, in our reptilian brains, you know the difference somehow. Somebody walking on the ground. The uncanny valley is when it's produced by a machine that we just know is not human or not natural in this world. But at some point, the uncanny valley will be conquered. And then I don't know what happens at that point. Like you guys probably know when you're looking at a meme that's AI generated, or a video that's AI generated. Maybe not music because it's not visual, it's audio. But at some point, that uncanny valley will be conquered, and I don't know what happens at that point.
But isn't this a lot of focus on product? I've been asked, would I use AI to make my work, and my answer is always, well, why should the computer have all the fun?
Right.
And, I'm sure it was great for this, but there's a big difference between sitting with your friends and making music.
No. Tonight, after I leave here tonight, I'm going back to the firehouse. The band's performing upstairs. It's a benefit, fundraising for the album. And that's what it's all about for me. It's people who, they smell like stale beer and cigarettes. And that to me, AI is not going to get that smell. Right? But and that's part of being in that world. And that's the world that I really enjoy.
But we'll be honest, for the future for that. I mean, it's entirely plausible to me that there is a generation right now that has been raised on, auto-tune, synthesized music, and prefer it.
Yeah.
They hear a real human voice singing, and they think,
There's someone in the audience who told me about the film. Can you tell us about the AI generated film?
Sure.
Is it a festival of AI films?
Yes, there is an AI film festival that is run by a startup called Runway. They're unique because they've actually developed their own video generating model as opposed to large language models that are purely predictive. And they just released their newest product, which I personally said earlier, we were mentioning the uncanny valley. Do we have a sense of what's real or fake? And I personally, as a digital native, could not tell the difference between the cinematic productions that this model can make versus what takes filmmakers years to make.
Right.
It's very powerful.
Was it good?
I thought it was great.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Check it out.
Yeah, this is new for me, and I don't know if, look, this is not something I've done before. It's something that I tried, and I'm sure we'll end up using it as a tool somewhere for some things. But I'd like to check out to see like what happens, like where we have to look at these things. Like you said, it's no different than a perspective machine or camera obscura or anything like that. I mean, we can't deny that it's here. And if it's a tool that benefits us, I mean, even from a financial point of view, please, we own our studio, I own, whatever, but if I were to, I just produced a film this summer that's being edited now, and I'm looking right now at putting music onto that film. I'm not using it, I'm using musicians. But I need to raise like $8,000 to be able to put music on. So there are certain things that maybe can bridge that gap between, like a financial, like a monetary gap. There are just purposes and uses for certain things with this. I'm not saying I'm not using it, but in certain places it might happen that it works for something. I don't know.
Can I bring something up? I'm really intrigued by the visual impact of what I'm seeing all around us. This is a visual art, what you're showing. I know that we're talking about the audio part of it, but
Right, sure.
this is visual art. And I'm just wondering how I guess because it was about bones in the Soviet Union and how they used the X-rays to bring in the music, that inspired you to bring this visual information to the forefront and present it. And I just wonder what the medical underpinnings, and you're talking about this AI stuff, but this, your
It's a
visual art.
visual show, right?
Well, your visual art is going right to the core of humanity here.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do as well,
Yeah.
to draw the duality, that, right, the dichotomy between humanity and non-humanity. So the idea is like this dichotomy, also a peek into the idea for me, like the prompting and the underpinnings and the underworking of that is kind of similar to that of the X-ray or the skeleton of our body, right? So it is definitely a visual show, and I needed to lay it out visually. So you've got these things that are playable LPs or singles, really, right? And then the video that's playing here is nothing more than just a visual clue. It's an audio visual clue to the visual show.
However, your visual art that you're showing, especially for me, the teeth, the mouths, some of these skulls and the hands, is very impactful. I mean, some of the ones that are more atmospheric don't touch me, but I really like, I mean, I'm interested in visual art.
No, see, I'm an artist, right?
Yeah.
Visual artist. So what I did with these is I purchased, I bought X-rays from dentist's office, I bought X-rays from hospitals, from doctor's office, and I bought them from veterinary offices. Some of those enigmatic lobby stuff were from there's ones here that are from dogs. These are dog pieces, you know. So I bought them from veterinary offices as well. So I bought them on the X-rays and scanned those X-rays, and then had those X-rays printed on archival paper, which are then face planted and mounted to the actual disc that we have. Yeah.
But did you get your idea, were you inspired by the fact that the bones were the impactful aspect of bringing the music into the Soviet Union? Did that inspire you to get the X-rays?
Well, yeah, from the historical like aspect of that, yes, absolutely. That was the inspiration of that, no doubt about it. To me, that was a very important part of it. But I think what made bone music so cool is the fact that it is on X-rays.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, not clear. I mean, literally, it's people forging in dumpsters at that time to get this raw material to be able to burn music onto it.
You mean the X-rays were in dumpsters?
Well, at that time period, they would get them, you know, they would, any way that they could get the X-rays to be able to burn onto it as the raw material.
Because the X-rays are the easiest way to burn music.
Well, I don't know if you're,
Something.
I'm of the age where I remember Mad Magazine when I was a kid. Once at the back of Mad Magazine, you'd get like flex disc, right? Sometimes there's some magazines would come out, you know, Aquarian or maybe Rolling Stone, which I spent some time at Rolling Stone. You can get it, take it out, and play music on it. So this is really, these are flex discs that are mounted on heavy material. Go ahead.
Why didn't you put the music on the actual X-ray?
Because it's not archival, and it is an art exhibition. So everything you're looking at is archival. So I mean, serious, that's really was the basis of it. X-rays would eventually degrade, you know, so I wanted to make something that, you know, I ended up scanning them, creating them, and then having them printed out at an archival, really big archival shop that was able to mount everything. So this will last like well after my death, hundreds of years. That was the only purpose of it, just, you know, pragmatic.
Do X-rays not last a long time?
Well, they get damaged and the material could disintegrate, so it's really not considered.
I mean, the needle going along the groove
Well, that would degrade it as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's why if you buy one, you get like an MP3 away from it, so you can hear the music, or you can literally do it if you want.
So when you're making like the original film, it's beautiful because maybe you only hear that Rolling Stone once.
It's actually 1 to 8 times is basically the average. So on a real X-ray, you get about 1 to 8 times to be able to play. These you can play hundreds of times if you really wanted to play this. This is actually like playable material, and I did it. So I did a test like a year ago, and I bought it. And I burned it through my record player 100 times, and it still sounded pretty decent. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything about?
I mean, you could contextualize these images in terms of the memento mori tradition, you know, the remember that you will die.
Exactly.
All those Renaissance people, images of people holding skulls.
Exactly.
And also, it strikes me that, one of the things we've always valued in artists is the penetrating gaze. A great portrait reproduces the exterior, but it reproduces it in such a way that you believe you're seeing something about the internal nature of the sitter. And this kind of literalizes that.
Yeah.
You're literally penetrating.
It's always been, I'm going to mispronounce the Latin on this too, but Cormac McCarthy, right, in Arcadia Ego, which is carved into the gun of Blood Meridian, if you remember. So even in Heaven Night it says death, you know what I'm saying? So it is memento mori, and there is part of that that's here. It's just, I've always, I can't say I'm a fan of memento mori, but it's part of the art history and part of my history as well, as an artist, Questions?
Well, the teeth, can I say something? The teeth can symbolize a devouring kind of energy that's part of our zeitgeist right now. That there's an energy that's just devouring our minds and our lives. It's political, and we're constantly being consumed by these bad news and things that are going on. So there's a certain viciousness in the teeth and the expression that's in them.
And the question is too, right, when it comes to that, yes, lots of things are going on that are horrible every single day. But I also think we're more aware of it because of what we carry in our pockets. In other words, it's nothing new to mankind, humanity, but we are certainly never had a chance to view it from the minute you wake up to the minute you fall asleep, and just instantaneous news from all over the world, right? So we're finding out about, and I think that's also part of, in a weird way, the technology that's delivering that to us as well. Like we've never been this aware of what's happening, good or bad.
Not as much good as
We'll try to change that. Yeah.
So, is it possible that in the same way that contemporary music like the Beatles and the Stones and Chuck Berry brought down that civilization and brought down that wall, is it possible that AA and modern technology could destroy our civilization in the same way? Change it in such a way that it's...
Well, that's one of the big fears that people have, because there's no humanity. So in other words, I get this wrong, but I think recently they programmed at one of the universities, like, AI would do anything and lie to its creator to stay alive. I don't have the exact details, but the answer is yes. If they start putting, nuclear bombs on AI, who knows if we're always hoping. You see every movie that's made, at the end, somebody rails against it, decides not to turn the other cheek because it's humanity, but with something that's non-emotional, I think that way. I don't know. Maybe.
So the bottom line with AI is, and probably the reason that it can't be copyrighted is because it lacks the soul. And the way that if I was going to go see someone perform somewhere playing an instrument, I can look into their eyes, I can feel what they're feeling, I can be moved by what's in their soul. Maybe AI can make me laugh, or make me giggle, or do, stuff like that, but not in the same way as that human interaction. And that's kind of what we're losing in society, is that human interaction like we're having right here. Like we could do all this in a Zoom meeting, but it would not be the same.
We felt that way during the pandemic. I remember during the pandemic, I had a house in Woodstock, and I remember we left New York for a couple of months, and we were isolated, and everything was completely isolated. So yeah, I mean, there is this loss of humanity when we are social creatures, right? And so yes, but again, it's all being played out right now. We don't even know where we are unless the end game right now. We can't figure out. Yes.
I think that also comes back to you doing this as a visual artist again, that you were so successful at capturing these images the way you did. A less successful artist could have done the same project, the same task, and represented these in a way that didn't come across like you really created a collaboration between human and AI. So the visual, and I realize the human element to the lyrics also, but speaking of the visual aspect of it, your cropping and your layering and your nuances and gradations, whereas if I would imagine, a lot of AI images would be just kind of, less nuanced again, very graphic, okay? And you cropping them in as personally as you did, the close-ups, but letting them have such an abstract element to them invites the viewer's subconscious to connect on a deeper level.
Well, thank you, because the x-rays are quite large, and each one of these are my cropping and my understanding of what I wanted to do, both abstract and, like accurate.
Yeah, and we don't just see a skeleton in different ways.
Right,
We see
right.
something way deeper. So it's very successful.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question for Dan. Something I never thought about until today, which is, who has the copyright on our x-rays? The hospital?
To be copyrightable, you need a creative expression that is fixed, and there's nothing creative about an X-ray.
But the answer is, that's why I purchased them, because I could get these online also, right? Like, you have access to these things online. But I wanted to own the x-rays and scan them, so in fact, they are part of the provenance of the, intellectual IP.
You're making something entirely new, but something.
Yes, exactly. I do actually have the physical entries. And they cut out the names of the people, they were not in there, everybody's name was cut
I
out.
never thought before about the fact that the images of our bones are in fact, something so personal.
Right.
Is in
They're
fact.
personal, but there's no
Yes.
human element of creativity in creating normally. Also remember when Kumar Nanda did the elephant paintings, also don't qualify, because animals are not considered human authorship.
Aren't images like these protected by HIPAA?
By HIPAA.
HIPAA.
I think that.
All medical records in a hospital can't be.
Animals, like what are they?
Because the animals, there are animals,
So, I think the question is whether or not his x-rays.
well, they're not connected to anybody, because all the names are taken away, they're literally cut out of them. So the physical x-rays themselves, the names, the hospital, everything is removed from that. So there's really no way to trace who they come from.
Actually, I think this one kind of relates in a way to John Copeland's work, that he did photos of parts of the body.
Yes.
Because these are, these interesting parts where, like this one here is fascinating to me. I don't know, I think it's a chicken.
Sorry?
The x-rays are all from the dentist.
Well, no, there's dentists. So behind you right there is obviously like a small dog or a cat or something. And these are actual size. So some of them are dental. That one, there are animals, and then there are people. There are skulls. And the image I chose as like the hero. They call it the hero image now, right? The one that represents the show is this one, which is the skull, and you can see the skin as well. So I wanted to like the inner working of the brain, the skull, and I chose the one image that shows it. I felt it showed all the elements of the film. And that's the last piece of the show.
Is there an aesthetic reason that you made it square rather than?
So I purchased, as I mentioned before, so I got these from Jack White's company, and they were very helpful, Third Man Records, in getting the material to me. Jack White from the White Stripes and Rocking Tours and other places. And they're very big on trying to bring this material back again, like the idea of burning into, discs. And so they had round and square, and I had round and square, and I went through the process, and the round just seemed too normal. It just was like, it didn't seem like an art show. I felt like I was in a record store, and the square felt like, it's interesting enough to talk about, where I do have the round ones as well, but they didn't feel the same as this one was, It feels like a piece of art, it's enigmatic, it has a hole in it, people have spiced the hole, but then when they realize it's actually a record, it's like this level of realization. That's why I wrote it.
Also, your ability to compose visually got those skills. AI doesn't have those skills.
No.
Adding the art.
It's very minimal, I know my work, you see my
And
work.
use the components, as she said, this was presented.
Minimally, it's presented in a very minimalistic, exhibition style. That I don't think happens.
They were.
All right, thank you. Thank you all.
very much.
Together for many, many years.
Point out that there's some very beautiful works by Richard that are
Yes, my
drawn by
drawings.
hand, totally drawn by hand.
No AI.
In the office area.